So let's talk about healing or healthcare in the New Testament world. Just a very brief overview. This would be a class, a course in and of itself. So let me pull up some brief slides to give you an introductory sort of presentation. So, we are very much used to Western medicine and maybe even some Eastern herbal approaches or alternative approaches. But the view of healing and healthcare in the early Mediterranean world, I think, even extends beyond what we would understand as Eastern medicine. Very interesting, right? So let's take a look at that. We have a quote here from an ancient writer named Strabo. He at one point traveled the world, and he would venture out and he would describe what he saw. He would describe plants and peoples and regions. In fact, people said, don't travel too far. If you keep traveling, you're going to fall off a flat pancake, right? So when he comes to the area of Palestine, Syro-Palestine, Israel, he observes what happens there. He says they place the sick where three roads meet and question those who pass by on the chance that someone has a cure for the malady, the sickness. And no one of those who pass by is so base as not to suggest some cure when he falls in with them, if he has anything in mind. So it's kind of like the Google of the time. And people were sharing common knowledge, and they would drag these people out to the crossroads to get that. It's very interesting, right? So a couple of things to observe here, in anthropologically speaking. So this is not psychologically speaking, this is not pathologically speaking, but anthropologically speaking, we have to make a distinction between the terms disease and the term used for illness. So with disease, we would consider a biomedical malfunction afflicting an organism. So it's purely physical, right? An illness would be a state of being. So it's a disvalued state of being where social networks, your functioning in the community has been disrupted, and therefore meaning of life is lost. You see the difference here? So we often say sickness, disease, and then we throw illness in there as if they were synonyms. I want to make a distinction here, okay? And the question is, when we read about healing accounts, what do we read about, and what do we take away from it as a people often living in the West as I teach this course, right? Are we interested in the physical healing? I think we often are, because it impairs, but are we also interested in illnesses being healed, our functioning of our communities? And I would bring to you that I think both are talked about, but maybe even stronger so the second one. Now, Jesus presented himself very much so, or is presented by the gospel writers, as a folk healer. Like he met people where they were and entered into what they would be the remedies. At one point, he like spits in the mud and puts it on their eyes and find herbs and things like that. So here's actually a presentation from the Gospel of Mark, an inventory I once did. And I just have just passages on the left side. You have the chapter numbers and the verses, so it gives you little pieces of the text. And there are just stories there, and they're often about individuals, right? Persons, if something happens to them and Jesus interacts with them. So this includes both what we would deem physical healings, right? As well as interaction with the demonic. To the people in the stories, they both deal with illness because their lives are interrupted as part of the functioning in the community, and we tend to make a distinction for like, well, was this a spiritual interaction? Could this be mental illness? Is this physical? Is there something wrong with the skin? But the individual itself is not part of it, it cannot function, right? And so we see that Jesus restores individuals, whether it be on a spiritual level, whether it be on the physical level, right? Examples of Peter's mother-in-law has a fever, he heals her, unclean spirits are sent out, people are healed from leprosy, lameness, hands are restored. We saw the story of this woman that had an issue of blood for 12 years, etc., right? But then I want you to look at the rest of the story as it unfolds. We see the possibility that comes forth from that healing, as well as straight parts of the story emphasizing that, such as when you see the story of Peter's mother-in-law being healed of a fever, in the story we see that she attends to the people in her home. That's her role in the home. And so she resumes that. She's serving them. The paralytic man, he picks up his mat and he walks and he goes home. We also see the potential after a man had a hand restored. So now he's pure. Remember this idea of purity. He's able to rejoin the synagogue and participate in his function there. And so we see that all the time. We see there's the restoration of an individual, but it doesn't stop there. He's restored to the community. And maybe we can take even a step further. That means that the community is a little bit more restored because the individual components are restored. I think that's the picture of healing in the New Testament world and in the New Testament. That healing means meaning is brought back to life. Restoration means we become part of communities. And when communities are restored, life is restored. So Jesus came to heal and to restore the marginalized in society. And as communities are restored and as equity is doled out and as people are made well, we are all made well.